775 BC, 31:20 AM. This is the first year of the first Olympiad. This is the first official Western world calendar, and as is shown in When the Sun Darkens and Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse, the Western world will die in 2040 AD during a pole shift caused by planet Phoenix. This year, 775 BC, is the year 2040 Anno Pyramid. The pyramid being the seal of both Joseph, Israel, and the United States. This was 864 years after Ephraim and Manasseh adopted into Israel in 1639 BC in Egypt, two patriarchs who would father peoples that would become mighty empires in the last days. The Battle of Kuruksata in 1879 BC was fought between the East and West exactly 1104 years, 552 plus 552 earlier, and this year of 775 BC is 480 years after the Danaan dynasty of Mycenae was founded in 1255 BC, the Mycenaeans governing over the Peloponnese. This was exactly 64 months, 864, or 672 years after the exodus of Israel from Egypt in 1447 BC, and 1872 months, 156 years, of the divided kingdom chronology, 1872 being 144 times 13. This begins exactly 2880 years, 144 times 20 before Armageddon. 767 BC, 31:28 AM. 22 years before Israel was carried away captive to the land of Assyria, the prophet Hosea foretold that this would occur. Hosea is commended by God to marry an adulterous woman named Gomer, this being a prophetic foreshadowing of the time coming when adulterous Israel would be removed to the north. Interestingly, the prophet's name Hosea was the same name as Israel's last king Hosea, who was on the throne when Assyria came and took the 10 tribes by force and deported them in 745 BC. As this was 680 years after Israel escaped Egypt in the Exodus in 1447 BC, this is exactly 244,800 days, 2448. This is factored easily on the ancient year of 360 days a year. 765 BC, 31:30 AM. The prophet Amos foretold that the Israelites would be led captive out of the land. His prophecy dated 2 years before the great quake of 763 BC, during Uzziah's reign over Judah and Joash of Israel. 763 BC, 31:32 AM. King Uzziah of Judah usurps authority and office of the priests, violating Mosaic law. When Uzziah was in the most holy place, an earthquake occurred in Jerusalem and Judah, as the solar eclipse occurred over Assyria according to an Assyrian eponym. The inhabitants of Jerusalem fled to the hills for fear of collapsing buildings. The temple wall cracked and bright sunlight pierced the inner darkness and illuminated King Uzziah, and he was instantly seized with leprosy and subsequently banished from the city. Pliny the Elder wrote over 7 centuries later that there was a long demonstrable history of earthquakes attending eclipses. This was the 240th year after the throne of David was established in Jerusalem in 1003 BC. 1. Zechariah. 2. Secrets of Time. 3. Josephus' Antiquities. 753 BC, 31:42 AM. The beginning of Rome was in this year by all accounts, and the first king was Romulus, who orchestrated a treaty with the local Sabines to enlarge the Latin state in Italy. A container of earth was deposited in the foundation containing dirt from Troy. The Latins had a long history as well as the Sabines, but a newer people had emerged as a great power in Etruria, called the Etruscans. The Latins early on were merged racially with the Edomites and blood of Esau through Zepho and his kin. The Latins claimed no glorious history, but exiles from Asia Minor arrived, claiming descent from Troy, landed on their shores, and from these men emerged Rome. This was a large body of men who landed without women, as will be explained in 749 BC. It had been anciently prophesied, according to Lactantius, that a mighty empire would be born from a colony of Trojans. The Romans themselves identified themselves as the descendants of Troy, and in the fourth letter of Hillel 3, among the Vatican archives, we read that about 2,000 years ago it was the majority opinion that Rome's origin was with descendants of the Trojan state, along with other adventurers who established themselves along the banks of the Tiber. A late translator of the book of Jasher sometime after 753 BC rendered a passage in Jasher, quote, "And the children of Chittim are the Romim, who dwell in the valley of Canopia by the river Tiber. Unquote. The Trojans are called the people of Dardanus, and this is why they chose to migrate to Italy. In Scripture, peoples are called by the names of the geography they inhabit. One of Japheth's sons was Javan, who himself had 4 sons that became nations: Elishim, Tarshish, Chittim, Dudanim. These people took up residence in Asia Minor, along the Aegean coast and Italian peninsula, and Sicily and Sardinia. Tarshish in Asia Minor was later rendered Tarsus, home to the famous apostle Paul. The Chittim were the Latins of Italy, and the Dudanim along the coast were the Trojans of Ilium, who claimed descent from Dardan, Dudon, plural being Dudanim. When the Trojan exiles arrived in Italy, their speech was understood because these exiles were racially and linguistically kin to the Chittim. The city of Rome was initially called Septimontium, or City on 7 Mountains, and Romulus was the first of the 7 kings of Rome. During his reign in the beginning of Roman history, it was prophesied that the end of Rome would be under another ruler named Romulus, and this was indeed fulfilled in 476 AD, when the German kingdoms came together and defeated Rome. Incidentally, the founding of Rome in 753 BC was 476 years after the fall of Troy in 1229 BC. Tradition asserts that Romulus was a murderer who killed his brother Remus for the kingship, and this parallels the fact that Cain kills his brother Abel, and Cain died in the year 753 Annus Mundi, 3142 BC. There were 5 tribes in ancient Italy at this time. Only one of them were known outsiders and not descendants of Japheth or Javan. Today we refer to these people as Etruscans, but the early Romans called them Umbri, which is Latin for Hebrew. These people were Hebrew Phoenicians who settled in Italy about 3 to 4 centuries earlier. It is known that before settling in Italy and founding Etruria, these people had come from Asia Minor. Livy, about 2,000 years ago, wrote that the Etruscans were a Semitic people organised into 12 peoples, who were very learned in religious law and matters, a people who held nothing more sacred than their ancient religion. Livy also related that the holy men and priests of the Etruscans were by sacred law all from the same tribe, Levites. The Etruscans were probably part of the great Israelite migrations of 1365 and 1345 BC. The Danaan and Ionian waves that settled in Asia Minor and formed the Ionic states, before again relocating to Italy shortly after the Trojan War. It has been found that the Trojan hero Aeneas was venerated in their art. The Etruscan alphabet derived from the Greek alphabet that was in use about 700 BC, which we know came from the older Phoenician alphabet. The Etruscan language was not Greek nor Latin. They merely adopted Greek in their script. This year, the founding of Rome was 828 years, 414 plus 414, after Zepho, grandson of Esau, begins to live and rule among the Chittim of Italia, or 2 cursed earth periods. This was also 612 years, half of 1224, after the Danaan migrated throughout the Peloponnese in 1365 BC. 612 is a quarter of 2448, and the sum of 1224 is a timeline found between many events in world history related to Israel and its descendants. Rome will be known by its neighbours as the ravening wolf, and these people will emerge to be terrible foes to first Israel and Israelite-descended peoples, but later to Christians and Christian institutions. Nothing has done more damage to the Christian faith than the Roman Church. The first victims the Roman spirit of Esau will afflict, conquer and absorb are the Jacob-descended Etruscans. 753 BC begins the Ab Urbe Condita calendar, or from the founding of the city. Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria in this year conquered the northern tribes north of Assyria, and Indo-European people descended from Japheth settled around the Black Sea. These were the ancestors of those people who would be forced to integrate with the Israelites after 745 BC and later, a people who would arise in history as the mighty German nations, the same Germans that would in 476 AD conquer Rome. In this year Rome was founded, the Assyrians conquered those people that would defeat Rome. 1. Cicero on government for Balbus. 2. The Discoverers, Burstin. 3. The Magus, Volume 2. 4. Nature Worship. 5. The Arco Volume. 6. Jasher. 7. Tracing Our Ancestors. 8. A Short History of the World. 10. Livy, Early History of Rome. 11. The Origin of Greek Civilization. 12. A History of Civilization, Volume 1.